Hi, welcome. Today is my first story time video, and I'm diving right in to one of the most serious topics that I could um, choose, and it's my experience with the mental health system. And so, my hope in sharing this information is to help anybody who watches it feel connected, feel more accepted, um, to feel more hopeful, and um, just to share my experience, what worked. Um, so I wrote a few notes just to kind of keep me on topic, but I really have no idea how this is going to go. So we'll just give it a try and see how it goes. So, growing up, I used to worry about things. Like, I went to the Smithsonian Museum with my parents when I was about 8 or 9, and they, at the time, this is in the 70s, they had an exhibit of a warplane hitting a house, and that led me to being nervous every time I heard a plane go anywhere near the house, that there's a possibility that that plane could hit my house. I saw The Wizard of Oz, and other than the flying monkeys, who I thought were really cool and also horrifyingly scary, the tornadoes. I I found out that the flying monkeys were imaginary, but the tornadoes were real, and they can happen anywhere. And so that was another thing that I worried about. So I tell you this just to let you know that there was always an undercurrent of, I guess, anxiety growing up. Um, it could be normal that every person has these concerns, but that's what I remember about, um, some things that stick in my mind looking back, like, was that, part of what I felt later on in life, or who knows. But my first, so nothing out of the ordinary until I was an adult, like a married mother. When my ex-husband and I were going through therapy, like, for years, we went to all kinds of counseling, and when it was finally determined that our marriage wasn't going to work, and we hired a mediator and we started to divorce, I found myself just so disappointed that my parents were divorced, my ex-husband's parents were divorced. We really thought we were going to be able to make it work. We really wanted to, like, prove that we could make it work, and we just couldn't. And I knew that I was affecting my son's life forever, but it was also which is worse, growing up in a household where the parents don't agree on fundamental things and argue, and sometimes the arguments are at an unhealthy level, or is it better that both parents are reasonably peaceful but living separately? I don't know the answer. I just know that I made the decision that it was healthier for everyone involved that we get divorced. And so that was my first real experience with mental health issues. And what happened was I would cry all the time. I would cry at work. I couldn't help it. I couldn't control the crying. And I couldn't sleep at night. And when I did sleep, I had horrible nightmares. So over time, I was sleep deprived and very, very sad. So at the recommendation of someone that I worked with, I went to see my doctor and I told him what was going on. This is my primary health doctor. I told him what was going on. He said he thought it was situational depression. This is in 2002. Situational depression. He said it's really important that I start getting some good sleep. So he prescribed antidepressant sleep aid, and I'm happy to share it. I don't know if you care, so like just let me know. Like just say if you want to know what it was. Just ask in the comments, and I'll tell you the name of it. In addition to that, he prescribed an antidepressant that I would take in the morning. So take one pill at night, take one pill in the morning. I also don't mind telling you the name of that medication. Just let me know if you want to know it. So within a couple of weeks, I started to feel much better. I was sleeping well. I was better able to function during the day. So it worked. It totally worked. And as time went on, the divorce was finalized. It was a pretty amicable divorce as far as divorces go. Like I said, we never even hired lawyers. We just had a mediator, and like we weren't looking to hurt each other. It just didn't work, and I say that, but it could have been bad. It could have been really bad. But I think the bottom line is that we are both kind people, and we didn't want to hurt each other. We had both grown up with parents who had miserable divorces, and we didn't want to do that to each other, and we didn't want to do that to our son. So yeah, it worked out. It worked out, I would think, pretty well as far as like divorces go. So yeah, I never regretted it. I never regretted it. I always wondered if my son would have had the challenges that he had if we hadn't gotten divorced, but sometimes I wonder if they would have been even worse because of some of the things that were happening in the marriage. So I'll never know. All I know is I made the best decisions I could. I did it with as much love and compassion as I could. I was as kind as I could be, and I'm pretty much at peace with it. Pretty much. So, eventually, I don't remember the exact timing, but eventually I talked to my doctor. I said I was feeling great and I was ready to wean myself off the medications. And so, with my doctor's help, I I tapered off the medications, and that lasted until 2009, approximately. Maybe 2008, 2007. Approximately 5 years later. Approximately 5 years later. So at this point, my mom was very sick. I was a single mom. My mom was very sick. She had dementia. She was a so God bless my mother's sweet soul. My mom, um, so my mom was a compulsive gambler. She had emphysema. She had dementia. She eventually found out she had lung cancer, and that's what she died from in 2008. So in actuality, she was sick for approximately 10 years before she died. So, so like, so I guess like starting in 1998, she started showing signs like she was compulsive gambling. She wasn't paying her bills. Um, she was starting to show beginning signs of dementia, but she was so young. And I know this isn't about my mom, this is about me. But the reason why I'm telling you this is because, it definitely impacted me. My mother wasn't, available for me. Rather than a support, I was really like worried about her. And her longtime boyfriend left, and she was very upset about that. And they had a brutal breakup. There were lawyers involved. It was ugly. Ugh, it was awful because I really liked him, and it was just a shame to see um, that happen to people that I really cared about. So that was going on, and then my mother died in 2008. 2009, my son started to have some behavior problems in school. He was starting to act defiantly. He was doing things that, well, that's the defiance. He was doing things that I didn't want him to do. Like he was meeting friends in places that I didn't want him to be in, and things got progressively more challenging for me. So, along with dealing with my own mortality, seeing my mom so sick and passing away, which actually was very peaceful. We got a lot of support from hospice, and I highly recommend. So I worked with hospice with my mom and also my partner's mom just this last year, and both times just such an immense support. So back on track, and I need a little drink. It's iced coffee. I say iced coffee because I like to say it that way. um. So where was I? Oh yeah. So dealing with my mother's passing, dealing with my own mortality, feelings that came up going through the process of watching my mom pass away, and dealing with the challenges of things that my son was going through. and I don't remember the exact timing, but eventually I went back to my doctor and I said, it's happening again. I'm having, like the racing thoughts. I'm having trouble sleeping. I wasn't crying all the time, but this time I had thoughts in my head. I remember going to, because me and my ex-husband, we went to co-parent counseling until my son was 18. He was 6 when we separated. So, oh my God, did we go for 12 years? We went for close to 12 years, co-parent counseling. And I think I said to the counselor once, like, is it normal to have all this in my mind? And I had written down in a notebook, on one page of the notebook, like everything that was in my head. And she said, no, I'm going to recommend a counselor for you. And I went back to my doctor and I said, okay, I've got like all these thoughts. I'm having trouble sleeping. And he said, yeah, it's the same thing as before. It's like a situational depression. So I went back on the 2 medications, and again, they worked really, really well. And the town that I lived in at the time, just a small town, but they had this great youth and family services program where residents of the town could get counseling for free. Free counseling. So that was the counseling that my ex-husband and I went to co-parent our son. This is also the same group that I got counseling from. This is also the same group that helped my son through all his difficulties until he aged out at 18. Yeah, I think I've got my timeline a little wrong, but I'm getting all the important things out. So the counseling was very helpful. I was blessed that I didn't have to deal with like co-payments and things like that. But my son also had a psychiatrist. He had a neurologist, and we were also doing all those things. Eventually, so my son ended up. When did I first become aware of it? I think when he was 14. Apparently he started when he was 12, but I wasn't aware of it until he was 14. It really became a problem that he was abusing substances. I think he started off like smoking like cigarettes when he was 12. And then when he was 14, like he was getting into more things, more substances. And he was getting in trouble at school. They wanted to expel him. Recently, I went through a folder. I used to have 3 big hanging folders of all his paperwork. And before I moved last year, I went through 2 of the big folders. I went through the last folder earlier this week, and it just brought back so many memories. That's why I'm doing this video, because I want to have, I don't know, I don't want to forget it. Like, I shredded it all, but I don't want to forget how much support I had. And I want it to be known because it was such a hellish experience, but there was so much goodness in it at the same time. Like, it literally almost killed me. I'm gonna tell you. I just want it to be like, I want it to make sense in the way I'm telling you. So, yeah, so my son, um, he was charged with a felony. He he refused to go to his appointments. We had he had private counseling. He had in-home therapy. Someone came to the house. Eventually, he would leave the house, um, and he wouldn't be there. And then the person would just sit with me and talk. And then they would say, "I'm going to go because the person that I'm here for isn't here." But they had a lot of helpful resources. So even though my son at one point, for a time, he was participating and then he wasn't participating, but even then, I had access to this whole network of support. And so did he. He just wasn't, like I said, he just wasn't accessing it. So at one point during all of this, he was hospitalized. And he was hospitalized a couple of times, but this one time, this was 2010, because I remember seeing that date. Um, he was hospitalized. He was really mad at me. And he was hospitalized because he was acting like he wanted to hurt himself. And um, he had jumped out of a moving vehicle. He was hiding medicine in his bed. Like, he was hiding prescribed pills in his bed. And he was taking them more than what was... I don't even know for sure that he was taking them more than he was prescribed them. I just know that he was acting weird. Like, that was weird behavior. And of course, all this time he was getting in trouble, and it was not a good time. So on top of all of this, he gets hospitalized. And I don't know if you've ever experienced a loved one, a minor loved one, being hospitalized, but it's like the whole emergency room assessment, the evaluation. I think they call it an evaluation. And of course, like, this was 2010. This was 14 years ago. But like, the room is completely bare because it's a special room for people who they think might want to harm themselves. So like, it's like a locked unit. There's like a guard outside the door. It's like something that, unless you've experienced it, like, if you know, you know, and if you don't know, God bless you. I'm glad you don't know. So he was very upset with me, and he told the people there that he was very upset with me and that I was doing bad things to him. And so there was an investigation, which was like immediately dismissed. But I had to go through the questioning and the worst part, like, that was like horrible enough that my own son was like lying about my treatment of him. But on top of that, he he told the people at the hospital things about me. I don't know what it was, but enough so that they told me I could not visit him because I was upsetting him. So that was just too much for me. For whatever reason, that just put me on the edge, like the edge. I just lost my balance. I lost my equilibrium. I felt like I had done everything I possibly could. This is before Al-Anon. I finally got to Al-Anon in 2013. So now we're in 2010. And I remember it was March. It was cold. It was rainy. And I went to the hospital, and they wouldn't let me in. And they said I was upsetting my son, and they were trying to get him to stabilize. And so I couldn't go in. And I remember my ex-husband got there, and he walked right in. And I just felt useless. I felt useless. I felt hopeless. Ugh. It was just a horrible, horrible feeling. I felt like a complete failure. And I went home and got ready for bed, and I was having trouble sleeping. Even though I took my medication, I was having trouble sleeping, and I just kept thinking, I don't want to feel this way anymore, and I'm not really doing anything useful here. I'm not doing anything good. My own son thinks I'm horrible. And I just thought, I won't be missed. I'm not important. Nobody really needs me. Um, it would be fine if I wasn't here anymore and I wouldn't feel like this. I just felt like everything is too hard. It's just too hard. And who am I if my own son thinks I'm awful? Who am I? It was like, after I had my son, like, my biggest goal, my top priority was to make sure that he had everything that he needed. Every decision I made was based on what I thought was best for him. So, so I got this idea in my head, if I just killed myself, then, it would all go away for me. I wouldn't have to deal with it anymore. And so I was thinking of ways that I might do it. And, I had the pills to help me sleep, but like, how many would I take? How many should I take? Like, I don't want to be like almost killed. Like, I want it to like definitely work. So I was thinking, how could I do it based on the resources that I had, the tools that I had to help me? Like, how could I do it? And I thought about it for hours and hours and hours and hours, all night to be specific, all night. And um, I think I got something wrong in my timeline. I should have written my timeline in my notes, but it's okay. The important part is I didn't do anything. I didn't sleep at all that night, but in the morning, I took a shower, I got dressed, I went to work, I told my boss, I was a teacher in a school, I told my principal that I needed to go to the doctor, and I went to the doctor. And see, that's what was wrong with my timeline, because he put me on the medication. Okay, I'm sorry. I think what happened was my mother passed away in 2008. I was on the medication. I weaned myself off with my doctor. And then when my son was hospitalized in 2010, I went on the medication again. I think that's what happened because I was on it 3 times. Yes, I'm pretty sure that's exactly right. It doesn't really matter. My only point is the medication worked. And the other thing that's important is that I don't think that I felt suicidal when I was on the medication. I think I felt like I'd be better off dead before I went on the medication for the 3rd time. Okay. I'm glad I cleared that up. All right. So I went on the medication the 3rd time, and my doctor said, yeah, this will work. This will make you feel better. He said, you're not useless. You're not hopeless. He said, like, this is going to be okay. And and I did. I felt much better afterwards. I felt like I didn't feel as hopeless. I didn't feel the same way. Like, I was sleeping. I was feeling better. In the meantime, I am doing a lot of work, taking time off to call insurance companies during the day. I'm getting my son to uh, like day therapy programs. Um, for when he got out of the hospital. So I'm dealing with all of that, which was very, very stressful because there was a lack of coordination between different providers that we had, the insurance, what the insurance would pay for, the openings that were available in the therapy programs. It was a full-time job, and I had a full-time job, but it was up to me to make sure that, and I was the insurance provider, so like I was the one with the coverage, so I would stay home on certain days and just try to manage it all. So like, how many people are lucky enough to have days to do that? I don't know. It was rough. It was rough. But we also had, I had my therapist, my son had his therapist. We had, and they were always introducing us to organizations that had more resources. So it was just like this massive influx of information and possible help. But what would my son participate in and agree with? Because he was having his own significant struggles, which, you know, I don't know. Obviously, there's some kind of chemical thing in me. It didn't bubble up until I was an adult and went through like a crisis, my divorce, like a situation that I found to be um, highly emotional, I guess. But for my son, it happened much earlier. So I don't know if this is a genetic thing. I don't know if this is an environmental thing. I don't know if this is a situational thing. I don't have the answers. All I know is, like, people, I find that when I talk to people about it, they're very, very supportive. And if they themselves haven't gone through something similar, then they know, then they're very close to someone who's gone through something similar. So I feel like even though there's like this stigma attached to mental health things, like we're all touched by it. We're all touched by it. There is a massive system in place, and we have tons of people whose job it is to help in this area. And the majority of people, like we did have difficulties, but for the most part, people were really helpful, as helpful as they could be, because you can't make people do things. I couldn't make my son do things, even though he was a minor. So, am I getting off track here? So, two things that were really helpful. Two things. Taking advantage of the network of support. So, um, basically asking and accepting help. So, and when I say that, I mean professional support, because it probably would have been, well, I don't know. I don't know. Like, it worked out the way it worked out, but I wasn't as communicative with friends and family. Some of my friends, less of my family, because I felt like um, they did the best they could, but they weren't giving me the support that I felt like I needed at the time. And that's the best way to describe it, because I'm not saying they did anything wrong. I'm just saying it wasn't what I felt I needed at the time. And my son was really the first person in our family who had like these issues, to the extent that he had them. So, and I would have done anything to help him. So the first thing that helped me was the network. So I would say friends and family are great, but if you feel like I just didn't have the energy to keep everybody up to date because things changed so quickly, and I was still dealing with it was before Al-Anon. I was still dealing with a fair amount of shame and guilt, and there was part of me that thought like maybe I had something to do with this, like somehow I caused this, and maybe it was my fault. And so the different organizations that we worked with were helpful. And the other thing that was really helpful was perseverance on my part. Like if at any time if I had dropped the ball, my son wouldn't have gotten treatment. My son wouldn't have gotten support. He wouldn't have gotten treatment because there were always phone calls. There was always insurance. There was always, like I said, it was like a full-time job, just trying to make sure that he got the support that he needed. And of course, the whole time he basically hated me. He didn't really, but he acted like he did. And because he was just confused and upset, and he was going through his own stuff. And, who else are you going to let it all out to except, you're going to let it out to the person who is not going to turn you away for any reason ever. And of course, that's how I always brought him up. I always brought him up saying, nothing you can ever do will make me love you any less. Like, I love you completely unconditionally. It doesn't matter. I love you. So, like, basically, he knew that he could do anything to me, and I was just going to be there because that was my promise to him. Which is actually going to be another story time, because when he turned 18, he left the house. But it was because I changed the locks on my house, and that will be another story time. And I'll jump to today quickly and let you know that he's fine and we have a good relationship. But man, was it hell. Man, was it hell. Absolute living hell. I wanted to say something else too. Oh, my mental health. In all of this, it must have been a time where I wasn't on any medication. I wasn't on the antidepressant sleep aid or the antidepressant during the day. I went through a period where it must have been right after I weaned myself off from the medications after my divorce, where I couldn't fly in a plane without having like intense anxiety. Like I would actually avoid flying, and then if I felt like I really like needed to fly, I actually ended up taking medicine to fly, and I can tell you what medicine that was too. Just ask me in the comments, and I will write the medication. I'm pretty sure I remember what it was called. I only took it for a short time, but it was all because I was like so stressed about everything else that I just couldn't deal with flying. It was something that like I had always been a little nervous about, and then I just couldn't control my fear. When my son was little, I took like my responsibility for him so seriously that like it changed my entire outlook on life. Like I know motherhood has that effect on some people. It definitely had that effect on me. Like before my son was born, I was a little tiny bit of a daredevil. I used to like water ski and ride a motorcycle and like do all kinds of things. And after my son was born, I like wouldn't put myself in any kind of like seemingly possibly dangerous situation because like I knew that like I was responsible for taking care of my baby and I needed to keep myself safe so I would be around to take care of my baby. Um, so I think I've gone through pretty much all of my notes. Oh, there was a couple of things I haven't mentioned. So after the third time I went on the medication, my doctor told me that I would be better off just staying on the medication so that I didn't have to keep going through these periods of like not being able to sleep, having nightmares, and just like these either like obtrusive thoughts or being very emotional, like crying uncontrollably. He said, you know, you don't have to put yourself through that. You can just stay on the medications. And like, I never changed the dose. Like, I've always taken the same dose of the same two medications. And he said, it's up to you. You can wean yourself off. But he said, there's a lot of data. It's not going to, like, on the effectiveness and the side effects and the like if you can take it long term. And he said you're fine to take it low term. He said basically it's just giving you what you don't already have, so it's like a chemical thing. It's giving you the chemicals you need. So um, that's kind of I believe that's how he explained it to me, because he basically said like if I told you you had diabetes, you wouldn't be questioning me that you need insulin, so I'm telling you that you need this, so just like take it and take care of yourself. And he was completely right because I have taken that medication ever since. I haven't weaned myself off. And there have been times when and of course, I've had like that wonderful doctor um, retired. And I had another doctor. Then I had another doctor in the same practice. And then I moved, and now I have another doctor. But they've all been consistent in saying that if it's working, don't change it. Because, you know, I have said, you know, maybe I don't need to take these medications. And they said, how are you feeling? I feel great. Then why would you want to change it? It's a good point. And the truth is, I never want to feel like I felt that night. I never want to feel that way because because it was just such a desperate, hopeless feeling. Um, and I'm pretty sure lots of other people have felt that way. But the truth is, even when I felt useless and alone, I wasn't. I was never alone. Okay, so now, like the miracles. In 2013, um, April of 2013, my son was going to be turning 18 in a couple months. All right, so he had stopped going to his appointments. Like he had gone like every now and then he got to a point when he was 17, he was like, I'm not going to my psychiatrist anymore. So I had been going to his appointments without him probably for, I don't know, a few weeks. Or maybe like he would go and then he wouldn't go. And so it was spotty, but I would always go. And eventually his psychiatrist said, I can't see you without him because, like, he's my patient, you are not. And you don't need me. And I said, well, I might need you. Like, I take this and I take this. She was like, no. She said, you are stable, you are good, but here's what you need. She said, you need to try Al-Anon. So I was like, Alla what? And she said, Al-Anon, it's for people who love people like your son to help them cope. And so that was the beginning of, like, my true peace, because I went to my first meeting and it was very calm and welcoming, accepting, gentle. I just learned so much. And the thing that I caught on to right away was substance abuse, alcoholism, whatever you want to call it. Alcohol is a substance abuse. My son didn't even really drink, but he took substances that could have killed him. What I found out was that it's impossible to cause, like, another person cannot cause someone else to use substances. I can't cause it, I can't control it, and I can't cure it. I'm going to get another drink, excuse me. Once I heard that, I mean, I knew I was in the right place immediately, but once I heard that, oh, it was like a weight. It was like a full, like, weighted blanket, like a really heavy weighted blanket, just fell off of me. I felt so much lighter because I realized that it wasn't my fault. And that I hadn't done something, and I was not a bad mom. And that made everything more manageable. And so, to this day, I take those 2 medications. I feel really good. I go to Al-Anon once a week. Sometimes I miss the meeting and I go once every 2 weeks. But because I'm 11 years in, and I'm not in crisis right now, thank God, like, that works for me. That works for me. And I didn't go into, when I first thought of making this video, I was really thinking of, yes, my own story, but also, like, what I went through with my son, like the time that we were escorted out of the hospital. And I kind of talked about that in one of my daily Al-Anon readings. I think it was Encouraged to Change. I think it was Encouraged to Change. But I don't know what day it was. I don't know what day it was. It might have been the 23rd, July 23rd, maybe. I'm not sure. But that's when the network, like, I went through my notes from that folder, and I called one of our counselors from the emergency room. It was like 10 o'clock at night, and I called her, and she answered the phone, and she helped me deal with what I was going through. My son was trying to detox from from basically an overdose of stimulants, and they didn't have room at the place where the hospital wanted to send him, basically like a rehab center. There was no room, so they were sending him home with me. I was scared to death because he was like detoxing, and there are a lot of really nasty side effects. And the way they described it to me, one of them was death, and like sudden death. And I'm not exaggerating. That's my recollection of what they said to me, was that because he took so many stimulants, he could just like die. Like they literally said his heart could explode and he would die. And I was terrified. So that was one of the things. But what came out of that, so me and my son were escorted out of the hospital at 10 o'clock at night and left to our own devices, except like we weren't really, because I had that counselor's cell phone number and she was keeping in touch with me. So there was always like an angel working with us, and like she was helping to guide me. This is what I'm saying. In the midst of this hell, I had all these helpers. I had all these people who were working in a flawed system giving me pointers on how to navigate the system, how to get my son what he needed, how to help me survive. And of course, so I went to therapy once a week for 8 years, like personal therapy. And I think it was like from 2008 to 2017. It might have been 2009 to 2000. I don't know. I don't remember the exact dates. But that was very helpful too. And that was another like wealth of information and resources. So I guess what I'm saying is, in my experience, like I take medication because it works for me. And, depending on who I'm talking to, sometimes I feel like I don't really want to talk about it with them because I feel like they're not open to it. But if you're watching this video, you're probably open to it. And if you're not, I beg you to please be kind and just keep your mind open and flexible, because you never know what people have gone through. And like for me, I don't want to be on any more medication than I need to be on, but I also feel very strongly that I need to take care of myself. And if this works for me, then this is what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to have guilt or shame over it, because I would say the same exact thing to someone that I love and care about. If you need to take medicine to take care of yourself, then take medicine to take care of yourself. Like, what's the question? What's the concern? Yeah, that part's really important to me. All the helpers, like Mr. Rogers has a saying that says something like that. Like whenever there's trouble, always look for the helpers, because there are always helpers. And even in my situation, in what I thought was my darkest time, and hopefully it is that was my darkest time, there were always helpers. My doctor, counselors. There are always organizations to help. So even though the system is flawed, very flawed. There are a lot of very, very caring, dedicated, good people working in the system. I mean, when I went through my folder, I was reading all kinds of notes and all kinds of good things that I did, even though I was like fighting to survive and just get through each day. I had enough know-how. I don't know what I had enough of, but I had enough strength. I don't know if it's intellect, I don't know what it is, but I had something, the sense, the gratitude to, you know, tell people how much I appreciated them, whether that was, I remember I was a single mom, I was a teacher, so it's not like I had like a really, high paying job and I could just like throw money around, but I found out one of the counselors loved to go camping, so I got him a gift card to an outdoor store that I knew he liked. And I saved his thank you note, and it was so sweet because, you know, the gift card was just a small token of my appreciation. And I'm sure he couldn't have gotten anything that anything sizable he was not going to get with my little gift card. But it wasn't about that. It was about the gratitude that I felt and his support of me. He wrote me a very nice letter saying that he knew I would be okay because I was so receptive to the help. And to my credit, I really was. Because I was absolutely desperate. So, like any help, any support I could get, I graciously accepted. And so this is kind of going into like my next story time of when I changed the locks on my house, but so that was 2013. Fast forward 11 years. I've been in Al-Anon for 11 years. My son is a responsible father of two, works full time, has a large network of friends. And, is doing the best he can every day, just like me. And he knows he's got a mom that absolutely loves him, adores him, no matter what. That's a good thing, right? Everybody wants to know that they have someone who just loves them no matter what. So, okay. I've been talking for almost an hour. I hope this was helpful, interesting, inspiring. I think my two major takeaways are persevere, don't give up. If you're going through a mental health crisis or someone that you love is going through a mental health crisis, persevere. Just stick with it and use all your resources because there are a lot out there and there's a ton of red tape. But the people who work in the system, I think they're there because they got into that career because they wanted to help people. So when they see that you're in it and you're not giving up and you want help, they tend to, and I know that this is dated, because, this happened over 10 years ago. But you don't have to go through it alone. And if you're listening to this, now you know about Al-Anon for sure. Most of my videos are about Al-Anon. But like, that was a game changer for me. Now, that wouldn't have helped with the insurance or the counseling or all that stuff. So, like, the other organizations that I worked with were still super important. But the Al-Anon part, like, I don't think I ever would have gotten to the point of feeling like I may be better off dead if I was in Al-Anon, because I wouldn't have had that guilt and shame that just really wore me down. So yeah, Al-Anon, baby. Highly recommend. Highly, highly, highly recommend. It's a very gentle, spiritual, not religious program. You take what you like, you leave the rest, you do it at your own pace, whatever works for you. I have not regretted a single day that I have since I have started going to Al-Anon. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, that's all. Thanks so much for listening. If you have any questions about anything I said, like I said, anything that I haven't included, I don't think it was really on purpose. Like, I was trying to include a lot of details, so if you have any questions, please just ask me in the comments. Just ask me a question. Or if you had any experience that you'd like to share, or things that you agree with, even things that you don't agree with, just please be kind. Please be kind. I'm being very vulnerable in sharing this, and there's no reason to ever not be kind. All right. Well, I will see you at the next, well, maybe I'll see you at the next story time. There will be another story time. That's my plan. So, sending you love. Take care.